Assalamu alaikum. My name is Muhammad Ali. This is Congregate live stream. In an age of social distancing, we are bringing a live stream. We have been doing so over the lockdown period, or for those in the US, what you call the shelter in place. I could never really understand that term. But we in the UK, where we are streaming from right now, it's Soul City Arts, our organization, an arts organization based in Birmingham in the UK. Have been doing weekly conversations during this period, this COVID-19 era that we live in. And we've been wanting to kind of explore different themes that we're kind of going through in these kind of unprecedented times, these kind of moments that are, you know, almost like something out of a film where we see the world has changed, the world is on fire almost. And we wanted to create an outlet that was bringing academics, creatives, thinkers, people I respect and people I'm inspired by, to kind of bring this together as a conversation, as something a little bit different, where, you know, we'll be performing and creating a bit of art and responding and kind of letting that permeate through this conversation that we're having and streaming out to people who are watching. So this is streaming on Facebook Live right now, so do start sharing this link. It's also on the YouTube Live as well, on the Raise Karma YouTube channel, who are our partners in the US, who have just launched actually, and we kind of cross broadcasting or cross streaming, whatever you call it, across both platforms. We have a theme today, and we have number of guests. But before anything, just my co-hosts and collaborators are James Hodkinson, who's all the way in Australia, in Melbourne right now, who's from the University of Warwick, but he's currently based in Melbourne for a few more months, and then returns to the UK. So he's a collaborator and an academic who's connected on, you know, nearly every show pretty much. James, in Australia, do you want to just say hi?
Yeah, good morning. It's the middle of winter here. I think I'm the only person who's in winter, so it is actually a little bit on the chilly side. And the sun has not yet risen, but I'm glad to see you all. Great to be here for this amazing topic.
And then we have Manpreet the Roch, who's kind of manning the decks in the background right now, kind of VJ. He's also a radio DJ as well. So you'll hear in his radio voice come through in a second, I'm sure. But Manpreet kind of has been supporting me in the background, kind of managing this OBS magic that we do. We are bringing this kind of multidisciplinary musical visual thing, and all done through OBS. So Manpreet.
Hello everybody. How's everybody doing? Hope you're all doing well. Hope everybody's feeling good. We were away for 1 week last week. I hope you didn't miss us. But we're back here on Raise Karma. It's really great to be here. We are reaching the end of season 2 soon. So it's been a real pleasure to be here with you guys, but just see the progression of how this whole kind of lockdown period is now evolved into this regular live stream that we're doing, exploring different topics, and topic of hip hop, which I think we got some amazing guests. It's going to be a really interesting topic. So I'm here. Great to be here with you guys. Much love.
Brilliant, fantastic. So we have a theme today. And then I'll just mention the theme first and then introduce the guest that we have on today. And the theme was, we were exploring pretty much the concept of hip hop. As some of you may know, I'm a graffiti artist, and I've been involved with street art and graffiti art, or whatever the fancy title you want to give it, since kind of the early 80s. So I'm showing my age a little bit there. Yeah, I'm a graffiti artist. This is one of the pillars of hip hop culture that really, we saw the movement of hip hop kind of spread throughout the world and spread to minority communities and people who were inspired, young urban kids who were looking for avenues for expression. And it was something that started in the US, in cities like New York. And you know, me, a kid from Birmingham in England, the son of a migrant from South Asia, you know, hip hop was a language that I was drawn to. So today's show, I was quite keen to explore what hip hop, where it came from, what were the origins and its roots, where it's come to today, and how it's evolved, how it's been appropriated perhaps, and, you know, all of these kind of interesting questions about how hip hop culture has been, you know, the journey it's been on. And these are some of the guests I've pulled together today, people I respect and some of who I've collaborated with as well. So and they're all three guests are in the US, and we also have an Australian hip hop artist from Sydney actually as well, who's going to be sharing some words as well. But first of all, I will jump to Colorado, I believe. Christy Z, do you want to just say hello?
Peace, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Greetings from 95-degree Denver. Peace.
Fantastic. Christy, do you want to just say a little bit about what you do? I know you've been involved for many, many years with Popmaster Fable, who was the vice chair of Rocksteady crew, as well as many other pioneers in the early hip hop days. Do you want to just share with us what you do, what you've been doing?
Yeah, Fable and I are co-founders of Tools of War, and for many years we threw park jams and did all kinds of wonderful hip hop cultural things. The jams are what I think I'm most proud of. The other thing I've been doing since 1998 is running national DJ battles. I throw the DMC USA branch of battles, and I mostly stay involved in turntablism.
All right, fantastic. Great. Yeah, we're going to have a conversation short. We're going to jump over to Suad, who's remind me what city it was, in Michigan, am I right?
I mean, that's where I'm currently in the state of Michigan, yes.
Okay. So Suad, you're an academic who's studied various things. Do you want to just give us a snapshot of what your areas of focus have been?
Yeah, the reason why I paused about Michigan is because one, I don't like, the feds. And two, I'm originally from Brooklyn, and so the background you see here is where I grew up in Evansville and Crown Heights in Brooklyn. And so my relationship to hip hop starts there. And then as I became an adult and a scholar, I'm an anthropologist, I was really interested in hip hop and the role that Black Muslims and Black Islam play in hip hop. And so I wrote a book. It's called Muslim Cool, Race, Religion, and Hip Hop in the United States. Came out in 2016. And in that book and in my performance, I have a one-woman show as well. I like to think about how we understand how the Black experience and Muslim identity come together, both to sort of challenge white supremacy, but then also sometimes to reproduce it. So that's me.
Okay, fantastic. And over to you, Shaka Campbell. I know you used to live in London. We collaborated in London when you used to be here, but now you're back. I noticed you said growing up in New York. So could you just tell us about how you've drifted across the oceans and where your roots actually are, and what you do as well, please?
Much. So absolutely. First of all, just thanks for inviting me to be a part of this. So I'm super humbled. So yeah, originally born in London, and dad was an activist. Back in the day, he moved to the States, so we moved over to New York, spent time in New York and Chicago, all kinds of stuff, and then moved back to England, and then now I'm back out in California. So just been all over the place. My love is poetry, is spoken word. That's what I've been doing for as long as I can remember. And where sort of hip hop is tied. I mean, the roots of what sort of who I am is Brooklyn. Like that's where I sort of cement who I am, so to speak, and was lucky enough to come up during the time of when hip hop was bubbling, when the whole 5 elements of hip hop, like when it all started, right? So, I've kind of weaved that into my work as I go forward. So again, thanks for inviting me.
Fantastic, no worries at all. Right, so yeah. Curious to know, James is an academic. Just to clarify here at this stage, I think, because I know that sometimes when we hear about academic conversations and people who study, I certainly have, I'd say over the past 20 years, the amount of times I'll get academics calling saying, we want to study graffiti art and what it means and your expression. And I'm a bit tired of it, if I'm honest, right? You do get a little bit of, no offense to some of that. Well, that's the reason you guys are here, is because, you guys are different. In particular, James, I would say someone I've collaborated with, there's a kind of you know, it's a bit of a lived experience type thing, right? You kind of appreciate that it's not kind of just being studied like a subject in a book. And too many a time I just feel like, you know, they just do my head in, if I'm honest, right? Some of the academic discourse and the conversations. And there's a point where I say, you know what, these academics, I can't deal with them, right? And it's, you know, that's kind of why we thought we'd break down the conversation to a more of a human conversation about, you know, real life and actually from a kind of lived experience perspective. For me personally, as I said, hip hop changed my life as someone who is totally not from a, you know, the other side of the world, if you like, across an ocean. You know how hip hop culture spread, and graffiti being one of the pillars of hip hop culture. And I'd often say, you know, it was kind of almost a little bit of a forgotten pillar of hip hop. You know, where hip hop was often, you know, often people think of the musical form, the lyrical form, but actually street art and graffiti art, which is, you know, so you know, spread around the globe. My earliest memories, and my question is going to be to everyone actually, what are the earliest memories of hip hop? For me, it was through the book Subway Art. So the format of graffiti art, the taking over of steel train carriages in cities like New York, you know, that being published through this one book, which was said to be the most stolen book ever. By the way, I paid for my copy of the book, by the way. But the Subway Art book, that was, you know, a breath of fresh air. This was the language of the youth. This was a language that was an art form that was born amongst the people, as opposed to from these galleries, these white wall galleries that we never really felt we had a place in. So this is why, till this day now, decades later, I'm still a graffiti artist, and I make a living from it. I travel. I'm very blessed that I travel the world, and hip hop changed my life, and it's a part of me. Even though I never thought, you know, as a kid growing up, that, you know, now I have 3 children and I'm still spraying walls. You know, I never thought I'd still be here, right? So my earliest memories of hip hop were about this art form that was really of the people, you know, and it was born of youth as well, right? Something, correct me, Suad and Christine, yourselves, and the more learned people in the room here can clarify that. As far as I'm aware, it's one of the few art forms that was derived from youth and young people, you know, that originated it. This was not something taught and then passed down to people, but rather it was born amongst people and young people and youth as well. So I'm going to pass it over to Christy to talk about your earliest memories of hip hop, please.
I came into contact with hip hop through the Sugar Hill Gang. It's just terrible. But I was out in the country in Pennsylvania, so I didn't have access to the real originators like the Cold Crush Brothers and people I wish I would have seen. I was very influenced by Afrika Bambaataa and the Zulu Nation. I read all the back of the record sleeves and thought one day I could go to New York and I would just Zulu and be so down with everybody. And to a degree, I, went to New York, got down with Zulu. It worked out that way. But I would have really liked to have gotten the real deal, true history of hip hop instead of the commercialized Sugar Hill Gang history. So I regret that. But ever since then, I've loved the DJ especially. And when I started hearing new scratches and everything, it was so dynamic. And then that's pretty much my favorite parts. You know, we had a book, How to Break Dance book, that we tried to learn to pop and lock with. That was hysterical. They jumped on the fad. It wasn't even grammatically correct. It was, you had to work really hard to get hip hop out in the country where I'm from. So I worked really hard at it, and then eventually I moved to New York and got completely immersed in it.
Yes. Okay. Yes. If there's anyone else wants to chime in with any comments, James, Shaka, and yourselves, if you want to, just feel free to just dive in. It's a good conversation here, so please be relaxed here. So, brilliant. Thank you, Shaka. I'm curious to know from yourself, what are your earliest memories of hip hop? And you might have to show your age a little bit here, if you don't mind.
I know. I was thinking that. I was just like, oh damn. Yeah, no, it's for me, it's in two parts, right? So if we talk about sort of the musical elements of this, again, as I said before, I feel super blessed to be sort of in living in Brooklyn when all of this stuff was bubbling up, and going to the parties. But I think, there's tons of memories, but I guess one of the best from a music perspective is the block parties. Right, everyone would have in your community at some point, someone would throwing a block party, and the seeing the DJs set up, they would steal electricity out of the lampposts, right? And so that's where they're sort of setting up their pieces, and then what then late to sort of MC which then later led to the rapper, right? Just having folks keeping the party moving as the DJs were scratching and people were sort of dancing in the streets. And it's just like my memory of sort of this, seeing this first communal view of Black joy, right? Just people in the streets, just loving themselves, loving the moment, loving the music. And since it was this new thing, people being innovative as well, right? And then the dancing that comes alongside of it, that to me is a sort of like the deep-rooted piece. And then the graffiti part. I used to be a graph artist back in the day as well. So then that whole component of, there's this whole wonderful underground in Brooklyn and in New York that's subterranean, right? That is just all for graffiti artists running through tunnels, et cetera, and like that for me is another memory, doing things that I quote unquote shouldn't be doing at times of night that I shouldn't be out. So that for me is are the memories that sort of hold close to me.
Fantastic. I mean, you mentioned innovation and stealing electricity from the lamppost, right? And I think it's quite profound actually, that young people were just making it up as they go along, right? Same with spray cans. The way I see it is, a spray can was never designed to paint art; it was to spray cars, right? So it's innovation. I just think it's a brilliant point that you mentioned. And Swada, what are your thoughts on? I mean, what are your memories of early hip hop?
Yeah, so I'm not sure why everybody's so afraid of their age in this call.
That's because you ain't old yet.
I mean, like, I'm grown, so I'm proud of my age. I turned 42 last month, and so that means I don't know a world where there wasn't hip hop, right? I grew up in Crown Heights, like I said, and so for me, I feel like one of my earliest memories, and I don't know, actually it was not the earliest because I think I was probably like 9 or something, but I actually remember being in Queens, and I always say that because there were trees and stuff, and so if you're from New York, you know what that means, where there were like houses and trees, and I think I was at a baby shower, I want to say, and I have this memory of being outside playing with some kids, and somebody drove by with like their bass booming, and it was like "Milk is Chillin'," and in Top Billin' audio too, and that song, and like that is like this, like it's like imprinted in my memory, right? And I feel like in terms of like that song, that audio 2 song, Top Billin', and like the idea of hip hop as like social, it's like social music, it's like the music of your community, similar to what Shaka was saying, like it's the music of the time, the music of the place. And so that was one of my earliest memories of it, and just thinking about and hip hop being something that was cool, that I wanted to know about. I was a little kid, right? So I wasn't in the mix like that, but wanting to kind of like understand. And then just one more I want to share. I always tell this story too, is like I remember, I think I was like 14 maybe or 13, and my friend had this cassette tape. She's like, yo, you gotta hear this. You gotta hear this cassette tape. And it was Method Man. It was that song, METHOD Man. I remember that. And it was like a cassette tape. So it wasn't on the radio yet. Like it was anything like that. And she was like, oh, this is super, you gotta hear them. And I remember like that also being really a significant moment for me as well, in terms of just kind of like, again, I think the music having, being a part of the discovery, right? And your discoveries as a person as well. So that was my story.
It's funny. It's funny you say that. I went to school with Milk. So.
Oh, for real?
Age.
That's crazy. But yeah, she tell him that's it, guys. That is the one. And to this day, right? When that come on,
yeah, it's over. It's over.
You know, it's been great hearing you guys all kind of have these nostalgic memories. I'm curious to know, you know, there's a whole new generation right now that perhaps is oblivious to this stuff we might talk about, right? Things we say, we're proud of our age and we're proud to remember the earlier days. Before I pass over to James, I'm curious to know how important is it to be about this memory or know this kind of historical narrative of how it was for this new generation that perhaps didn't experience it? That's just an open question to you guys.
Yeah. I mean, well, I'll say something. I mean, I think it's really important. I think, so first of all, I think hip hop, you know, like hip hop has like, I always joke, I have a woman that I dance with and to teach, like I'm learning like top rocking and stuff like that, the sister Amira Sackett. And so I always joke about her and like this idea that hip hop is like a Sufi tariqa. So people who know Sufi tariqa is like you have to have a teacher who's connected and you have to have a chain. You have to be connected that way, kind of way, right? Like you're not really legit if you're not connected, if you don't have this kind of chain. And so I think hip hop is the same kind of way, right? And I think real heads know, and even people come into the music and the culture, like you might come in because you heard this song and it was dope and the beat, you know, it was a bop or whatever. But then it's like you're like, but wait a minute, but what are they talking about? And what's really going on here? And who put this together? And what's the sample? Like, and there's this kind of learning process that I think is inherent in the culture. And I think that people like, you know, real heads know. So people who are really into it, like they're going to do that. So even if they're 21 and not 22 and not 42, right? Or they're 13 or they're 12, I think that there's an impetus in the culture to do that. And they definitely should, you know, sort of embrace that, because that's how you can't go anywhere if you don't know where you came from. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay, guys, thanks for sharing all those thoughts. I mean, it's amazing to hear that. My age is kind of pushes me towards the later 40s. So, right, I mean, my take on this just briefly is, I mean, I grew up in Liverpool in the UK. I guess in a kind of mainly white and Asian neighborhood. And so this was also against the backdrop of what got known as the race riots in a part of Liverpool called Toxteth, right? So there was kind of waves of violent rioting around many British cities in the late 70s, early 80s, triggered by the need for social change and racism in the police, the inherent racism of society. So that was kind of going on. And I remember basically going to, I think it was like a kid's birthday party, and it was literally the point, you know, when you kind of eating like jelly and ice cream at a kid's party, and then you realize that some older kids come in and you start to realize you're on the threshold of becoming like a young adult. And I remember going to this party and hearing this music that I'd never heard before. And so we're talking about Close to the Edge, we're talking about White Lines and things like that. And I remember some kids came in. I remember seeing a guy wearing white silk gloves and thinking, what the hell's this? What's this all about? What's going on? And then I saw my first live breakdance, and like within 2 weeks, all over the schoolyard, kids were effectively, you know, windmilling, caterpillaring, locking, popping, and that kind of stuff. And it just kind of came into what was probably not really black culture, but it sort of flipped over and it entered our world at that point. And I remember that moment as well. So it's great to hear that. My version of that is already very heavily mediated. So it's traveled, you know, it's a third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh hand by the time it reached me. But it also kind of changed my life as well at that point as well. I guess one of the things we've already kind of touched on these issues, but my question to the room is going to be about hip hop's roots. I mean, what actually started? You know, we've heard about Shaka saying this is like an expression of black joy. We've heard about people saying this is about innovation. But what do you think is the actual the things that were really driving hip hop? Why did it happen when it did? What are the roots of hip hop? Maybe I could throw that suggestion out to Suad, who's obviously written about this and researched it a little bit. So maybe you have something to say there.
Yeah, sure. So when I talk about this, I like to talk about the break, right? And I think the break as a kind of a sort of a metaphor, right? So people talk about the break hip hop because they talk about, like, you know, the break beat, that part of the song, and that part of the song being the kind of foundation of how then like the loop is created and how hip hop music gets started, right? But I think about the break in terms of the music. So that's the innovation, what Muhammad was talking about, right? This idea of this innovation, because like similar to the spray can, the vinyl wasn't meant to do that. Like when people created that initially, it wasn't meant to do that. So this is innovation. But I like to think about it in terms of also the break that created the African diaspora, right? That created the involuntary movement, right, of enslaved African people from the continent to the Western Hemisphere. Because one of the things that we know about hip hop, when it kind of emerges sort of in the South Bronx, is you have a convergence of like Afro-diasporic people. You have people from the English-speaking Caribbean, the Spanish-speaking Caribbean, people from the American South, right, who are sort of coming together in this space. And I think it's important because I think while there's a lot of innovation, it's also building on something, right? So when people talk about emceeing, like, well, there was playing the dozens, right? There's toasting from Jamaica. So there are these kind of practices or these kind of Afro-diasporic practices that existed that then sort of become anew in hip hop, right? And I use the term Afro-diasporic specifically because, like, you know, we have like sort of what we call in the US, at least Latinx people, right? Who may or may not be Black, but they're linked to the diaspora because of where they come from, because of their cultural traditions, and they're also a part of that, right? So you have all these people sort of coming together, and then of course you're in New York City. It's a devastated New York City, right? Like you know, there've been this deep disinvestment in those communities. White flight has happened, so like all the money that should be in the South Bronx is either in Westchester County, which is like right above the Bronx, like a suburb, right? Or is in Manhattan, right? And so there's a lot of that too, right? And those are not new conditions in the sense that, as you know, sort of Afro-diasporic people were used to struggle, but that was also part of the conditions that I think create hip hop. So I think it's a convergence of all these folks, the traditions they brought with them, the musics they brought with them, and then the realities of what they were living in at that moment. Like that's how we get hip hop. That's how I explain it.
Maybe Christy, could I throw line to you? Sure.
So I spend a lot of time basically interrogating pioneers and legends about the origins of hip hop. And so there's a couple of things I'd like to say is, you know, there are claims that, you know, it came from other boroughs and all the other stuff. But Grandmaster Flash told me that he DJ'd with other DJs, but when he first saw Herc trying to extend the break, that was everything. That was the difference. And I, you know, Herc is just plainly innovative in ways, and Flash went and tried to make the extension of the break seamless. So that was the evolution of like what I love, which is the DJing turntablism aspect. But to me is everything. That's the beginning, because aerosol art can include itself or not include itself depending on the artist, whether they want to be in hip hop or not. I've had artists say, I'm not down with hip hop. I don't want to be on a hip hop panel. And I'm like, we'll be on the panel and talk about classic rock if you want. So the aerosol art is a whole different ball game with so many different people of different colors in it. So DJing wise, it's Bambaataa, Kool Herc, and Flash as the three founding fathers of DJing. What we did with our park jams was put the DJ back up front again, because the MCs pretty much put the DJ in the background after they came to popularity. So that was one of the things of the Tools of War park jams in the Bronx and other boroughs, was putting the DJ back up front, and no MC could get on unless the DJ allowed it. So that was kind of cool. Another thing though, I was at a panel one time and there were different presenters, and one presenter was an academic, and they came in and said a lot of stuff and a lot of big words about how the beginning of hip hop started. And I can't remember who the person was, but it was interesting because then Grandmaster Caz came in to give his lecture, and in just one flat out sentence, he said hip hop began because we wanted to party. And they were too young to get in the clubs, so they had to make their own things in the community centers and the police athletic leagues and in the parks, and they just did it up. And so yeah, and now I feel like hip hop to many people just means rap, and now rap has become a 21 and up endeavor, and the youth can't access it again. So it's kind of interesting. Rap has become what discos were to Grandmaster Caz and that crew, that they couldn't get into a disco. Now most youth couldn't get into a club to see, quote, rap.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? That it's almost become a little bit of a closed shop for certain groups again. Maybe when we come on to talk about the future journey of hip hop, we will come back to that point. Maybe one of the ideas that seems to have come out of the conversation, and I think I heard Chaka mention it earlier, was the notion of battles, right? So battles, there's an element of kind of fighting for space. So in an artistic sense, yeah. So you've got the idea of the preeminence of the DJ versus the MC, who's in the front, who's in the back. You've got the idea of urban spaces, like a community center or whatever, stealing electricity but in a productive way to make things happen. It's fighting for the means to sort of create your own art. And I guess if we just sort of bring Chuck in at this point, one of the things that I guess as a different branch on the same tree that spoken word poetry has is that we also speak about battles there sometimes, in the same way that MCs would face off in rap and so on. But there's that sense of stepping into the circle, saying your piece, showing your chops, doing what you want, and then stepping back out the circle so someone else, another brother or sister, can step in and have their time in the limelight. So I guess I would see a certain connection there between spoken word and hip hop, even if it's a bit more kind of bit looser. Maybe, Chuck, you could say a few words, and if you want to respond creatively at some point, you could also do that. You don't have to speak. You can also poeticize if you want.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't have to tell a poet like he about talking, because that's all we talk. But there's one thing that keeps coming out from the conversations that I want to grab onto, right? And it's all of this connection, this idea of whether you could get out to the clubs, you could party, whatever the case might be, but this idea of wanting to be identified, right? Wanting to be seen, right? And if you think of it from the graffiti sense of it, and going back to sort of like that starting of just someone saying, I'm Troy from building 123, and he started tagging Troy 123, right? Then when and I didn't get this until well after, right? You've got these folks that are in these environments where they're feeling sort of trapped, at least, and again, this is just my experience, right? And then the idea of putting this piece on a train, right, that now is going through the entire New York City. It's like I'm moving throughout this city, like I'm being seen, right? And so I think that acknowledgement for me was super big, right? In sense of that sort of that part of the craft, wanting to be seen, then the community that it involved in, right? So there's that whole world with your black book, right? And you're taking your graph book and you pass your book to another graffiti artist, they give you yours, you put a piece in theirs, then you exchange it back. These are connections I was making with people, in multiple boroughs without going to multiple boroughs, because again, at that time I was younger as well. So I think just that connection from the larger hip hop perspective was super important, and then how that falls into spoken word. I mean, again, there's the MC aspect of it, there's the writer's aspect of it. There's it moving into the last poets. All of that, it's all connected, right? It's all coming from the same place, and so it makes me think of there's a kid that I used to admire when I was younger, and his name was Ralik. And later on, I sort of was able to step back and look at sort of that view I had of him. And so it kind of goes a little something like this. Ralik, he is Brooklyn leaning on a curved swag, a bow and arrow torque when he moves and cuts through air, Yankee fitted. He is an accessory to fresh kicks like quarter notes to Coltrane. His metronome heartbeat conducts a divine slang only understood by chaos on a beautiful wish. He wasn't born this way, but Brooklyn is a Latin sculptor, chipping at shoulders, seeping through cracked sidewalks and wombs. It shapes spines to sway with the sound of hustle and humid, and when it's right, and only then, when the streets sizzle and the asses ride backs like jockeys, the fingernails become multicultural and the heat raises skirts and plunges necklines, is where his changeling ignites. Here he's at home. When the phoenix breath of the A train burns his chest, the tar quivers and melts into his feet. He becomes a volcano footprint, tracked and tagged. hip hop stuck in his throat, and Baldwin massaging his chest. Now he is 3 parts hydrogen game, like smoke and mirrors, nature's illusionist. It is as if a pinnacle then, a harlequin swoove basting her slow curves, his testimony leaking. I don't really give a hell, smeared and colored in Basquiat. She, a gallery patron, he, exhibitionist. Watch his Adam's apple. Watch it dance. Look how his neck arches, back uncoils with each syllable he wipes across her lips like a creature stalking prey. He is crocodile murmur. He is Brooklyn taken in slow motion photography, framed and mounted on the sky. He is a metal silhouette, a World Trade Center onto himself. Simply the hidden track on the best album you ever bought. And he was made in Brooklyn. So that's sort of my memory of that. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for sharing, man. Yeah, man, we've got some good shout outs in the room for Brooklyn there. Thanks for sharing that, Chuck. I mean, it's amazing to hear, just going to wrap up what I'm saying. It's amazing to hear what you were saying about breaking out of space there and the kind of journeys that hip hop was already starting to do, both in terms of personal connections and artwork leaving the borough and going to the next borough. It's fascinating to hear about that journey. And of course, that journey is now gone global. And it's at this point I'm going to hand over to Manpreet, who's actually going to, I guess, connect back to where I am, to Australia. We're going to go up to Sydney and we're going to hear a live performance from a guy called Elfresh the Lion. Maybe Manpreet can introduce his brother there and tell us a bit about him, and we can then hear what he's got to say.
Well, Shaka, as always, you're blowing me away and blowing the audience away. Thank you so much for that amazing poem, man. I really appreciate that. And some really deep reflections that we've had on the roots and the origins of hip-hop, the things that people remember, right? Now, this brother that I want to introduce now, he recorded a short snippet for us. He's based in Sydney, so we're kind of flying from from Melbourne to Birmingham, and then Birmingham back to Sydney, where there's no flights going at the moment, but we're going to do it anyway, figuratively. But Elfresh the Lion is somebody who came on my radio show, I think around a year and a half ago, and he's somebody I've been following as a hip-hop artist who's of a Sikh heritage, similar to me. And what was really interesting about Elfresh is that he not only is outwardly very Sikh, he wears the turban, he's got the unshaven beard that many Sikhs have, baptized Sikhs have, but the kinds of topics that he talks about, the kinds of themes that he connects to are very conscious and very deep, and connect back to the origins of what hip-hop is and what it actually represents. And Suad, Christy and Shaka and Mohammed have already given some insight into how they got into hip-hop and what the conscious kind of pull was of hip-hop, in terms of tackling social issues, in terms of fighting social injustices. So I want to hand over to this guy, Elfresh the Lion, who is a hip-hop artist based in Sydney. He has a couple of albums out already. There's another album out soon that I'm going to tell you about in a second. But I'm going to just go to him and let's just hear what he has to say about how he got involved in hip-hop and why it's important to him.
Peace, this is Elfresh the Lion. I'm a hip-hop artist from Southwest Sydney, Australia. To me, hip-hop is a culture. It's a way of being. It's a mindset. It is the mindset of defying the odds, of making something out of nothing, of representing your authentic self, no matter the circumstance or the situation. It's being defiant in the face of adversity. It is standing up for what's right. It is community. It is togetherness. It is peace. And it is the encouragement of the best of each other, wanting to get the best out of each other. Hip-hop is a great space for that, especially knowing that it has come from the many years of oppression, marginalization, discrimination against, and slavery and subjugation of predominantly African American communities. It's a black culture emerging from the States, and the flip side of a community being segregated against is that it has created something in opposite to that. You know, it has created something that is embracing of all different cultural backgrounds, of all different people, of all walks of life. It celebrates your originality and your authenticity. And it's such a beautiful thing, and it's such a powerful thing. And it's why we see today all around the world, you know, people from all different cultural backgrounds, all different walks of life, regardless of the language, regardless of the social status, the economic status, that people express themselves through hip hop, because, you know, hip hop is so welcoming in that way. And it is led by such a you know, strong will mindset as a cultural foundation. I think, you know, right now it's so relevant, you know, with what's going on in the world. Hip hop has been at the forefront in terms of, from a music perspective and from a cultural perspective in the US especially, at the forefront of standing against systems of oppression and systems of marginalization. It has been the space that has empowered voices speaking against those who seek to divide and who seek to suppress and oppress people. You know, right now it's really, you know, within music being used to bring communities together for the consciousness of Black Lives Matter to resonate around the entire world. Hip hop has definitely played a part in that, you know. And I think right now hip hop offers hope. You know, it offers hope because it leads the way as a community of welcoming people. It is a space that, you know, through which people send messages of hope and inspiration and empowerment to remind us, you know, of what's valuable within ourselves and what's we should expect from the world around us. And that is love, respect, that is equality, that is justice, and that is, you know, liberation from oppression and marginalization and from the systems that, you know, that subjugate people and repress people across the world. And, you know, it's definitely a privilege for me to be a hip hop artist. I don't take it lightly, and, you know, I'm very grateful to be inspired by the mindset of the many hip hop practitioners who came before me.
Alrighty, thank you so much, Alfresh the Lion, for joining us on this Congregate live stream. And as you just heard, his journey into hip hop, what it means to him as a Sikh artist, how, you know, this hip hop kind of scene, the culture, what it represents against oppression, against marginalization, against subjugation, and him as an artist himself. Alfresh the Lion is a very conscious artist who connects his roots of Punjabi mother tongue and mother kind of issues of race and understanding where he comes from the Punjab subcontinent, from the Indian subcontinent, but also how that connects to his identity as a Sikh, And we see, as we've heard with Suad and as we've heard with Shaka and Christy, is that actually hip hop connects to people in so many different ways, you know, in so many different connections to their own identity and expressing themselves. Hopefully I can get this right. Alfresh has an album coming out. It should be popping up on the screen now. Yeah, here we go. This way. No, this way, yeah. Alfresh has an album coming out on the 17th of July. It's also going to be on vinyl as well. So all the old school vinyl lovers, get onto Elephant Tracks. That's Elephant not with a PH, but with an F. Arguably one of the biggest hip hop outlets, outfits in Australia, representing lots of amazing Australian hip hop artists as well. So get onto iTunes, get this album, Southwest. It's out on the 17th of July. And Alfresh the Lion, thank you so much for sharing your reflections and your thoughts. So as we saw, hip hop has a massive influence on people in terms of different backgrounds, different cultures. It doesn't matter. It's very universal. So I'd like to go to Mohammed firstly and just ask you the question. Obviously, hip hop has changed along its journey. You know, we were having this conversation about the origins of hip hop, what it represents and what it meant, and what we see in terms of hip hop now. Some of it, I'm not going to be polite and say some of the mumble rap stuff that I hear. I mean, it doesn't resonate with me. But what do you think, as somebody, like you said, something that's been connecting with you over these years, right? Something that's over 30 years you've been in this scene, you've been working in hip hop, whether it's through the spray can or through digital art. What do you think is the ongoing appeal of hip hop? And this is something I want some of the other guests to think about as well. What's the ongoing appeal of hip hop right now?
I mean, I was growing up in the 80s. It was hip hop culture that really, spoke to me. But actually, it was much later. I would say when I was growing up doing regular graffiti that was influenced by kind of that what came from hip hop culture. But actually, it was much later. I would say probably in the 90s where I was drawn to my own faith as a Muslim, where I was looking at kind of the creative expression of Muslims historically and calligraphy. And that was the world that really kind of influenced my graffiti. And when I started exploring and actually looking at what really interested and excited me was hip hop culture. When we look at hip hop and graffiti in particular, being an expression of humans, of people, and the beautification of script, and actually how that melded beautifully in a way with kind of the script of God, if you like, of an Islamic art was the beautification of the Quranic script. And actually I thought this is something one might see as perhaps two almost opposite worlds, but actually these ideas kind of melded so beautifully, and how it was an expression of something that was kind of real and very connected to kind of quite accessible as well. It wasn't this kind of high level thing. Even when you look at Islamic art, it was really just almost the self was almost invisible, if you like, in the art. It wasn't kind of the ego of the artist, but rather it was an expression of God being something that was the real higher message, if you like. And similarly, I'd say, although the ego is definitely ever present in graffiti art, for me, it was just an exciting kind of melding of these two worlds. But with Christy, we were just talking about different influences and different backgrounds in hip hop, actually. And yeah, I was just interested in what you were saying earlier, actually. Christy?
Which part?
You were just talking about kind of different backgrounds and different influences that actually people who didn't come from hip hop, actually. I'm curious about what you were saying there.
Yeah, if you get to pick up Fuzz One's book, you'll read that he was mostly into classic rock as well as a lot of other writers. And they came from all backgrounds, and pretty much, it was how fly your art was. It wasn't about what color you were or anything. There was a whole, if you watch Style Wars, you'll see all the different colors, represented. So it's pretty exciting. And I feel like aerosol art can be adopted to hip hop culture, but that doesn't necessarily mean that all the writers are going to go along with it and be hip hop. What if what I was saying was, what if classic rock had adopted aerosol art instead? Would be pretty innovative and interesting if it would have became a part of that instead. anyway, yeah, that's exciting for me. All the different backgrounds that melded into painting the trains and everything like that.
For real. Shaka, maybe, you know, somebody who's been involved in hip hop for many years, well, as a hip hop kind of connoisseur, but also as a spoken word artist. What do you think, as somebody who's observing it, what do you think is its ongoing appeal? What is it that gives it that longevity over this time? What's your feelings around that?
God, it's such a hard question, you know, especially when it's been, you know, it's been mixed in and appropriated so much, it gets all confusing, right? But I think, you know, at its core, if we agree that it was sort of stemmed from this need to be seen, this need to activate, so to speak, you know, there's always going to be the need for that throughout history, right? So I think there's always going to be a need to sort of find this thing that people can pull on, and at its core, it's about, you know, I mean, the whole culture is about folks being able to sort of put forward their experience, right? That everyone doesn't have a view into, right, on whatever platform that is. I mean, again, it's a little easier now with YouTube and TikTok and all these other things, but you know, I think there's always going to be a need for folks to want to show and share their story in their language, right? And so I think there's that, you know, hip hop and rap music, etc., allows for that to happen. So I think there's always going to be a need for it. You know, the direction it goes, I'm half and half with that, right? Similar to what you said, there's some of it that I can't get with, you know, but at the same time, you have to respect the fact that anything has to grow, right? It has to mutate and become this other thing to take on sort of how the world changes. So you got to embrace that part of it too.
No,
I don't know if that answers your
I think
question.
it
I was all over the
does.
place.
It's about telling your story, and there's so many different modern ways, technological ways of doing that. And the ongoing thing is that people want to reflect themselves, right? They want to give a piece of themselves in terms of their story and their identity and connect it with the different issues that are out there. I just want to quickly go to comments. Rashid said hip hop means happiness. Well, it meant happiness. Breakdance challenge, many goosebump moments watching live challenges, the most impossible creative dance moves. Later on it, guide my friends to it, and it went through me to Islam through lyrical content. Raheem, Guru, Public Enemy, thank you hip hop. So yeah, it connects to people in different ways, and even on a religious perspective as well. So thank you for that comment, Rashid. Big shout out going out to Johnny Turpy in Birmingham, Sofina in Birmingham who's locked in as well. Love going out to Ramalis in Memphis, Tennessee. Love going out to Rashid. Love going out to Abid in Birmingham. Shout out to all the viewers. Zobia as well. Big thank you to everybody who's locked in right now. And just tell us where you're from. Drop your comments in the comments, or drop your comments down below, and we'd love to know where you're listening from. James, I'm going to hand over to you now. You want to something that Shaka did say about appropriation, right? And what appropriation means in terms of people picking up this topic and making it their own, but in a way that's not really reinventing it, but becoming a voice of something else. James, over to you.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I guess it's something that's kind of as kind of organic and alive as hip hop culture. There's always going to be some tensions. I mean, we've already outlined some of the tensions. You know, to what extent were you authentic because you were there at the start, and to what extent are you then inauthentic because you connected with hip hop later down the line? It was also a music from the people. So what happens when somebody tries to commercialize it and record it and put it out? You know, who holds the purse strings? Who's the gatekeeper of that process? Where is it then shown through across media and so on and so forth? And then, of course, the whole idea that this is very, very tightly wound up and bound up with Black American culture, and then white American society or white communities around the world want to get in on it or be part of it, participate in some ways, and some of those tensions start to play out, I guess. So really, it's my question is, and maybe I could come to Suad now and ask her what she feels then about I suppose the political power of hip hop, you know, where it's come from. Has it been taken over? Is that a legitimate question? And does it still, in what ways does it resist being taken over, if at all?
Yeah, thank you. I think something that Christy said, and I forget who you said it, but this idea that hip hop started because we wanted to party and we couldn't party like where the other people were partying. And I like that because like when I teach about hip hop, people always say, well, you know, hip hop used to be, you know, real conscious and real this, and now it's like something else. And I'm like, and Christy mentioned it, like the Sugar Hill Gang. I was like, but one of the first hip hop songs that cross over is like Hotel, Motel, Holiday Inn. I'm like, that is not exactly like the like conscious anthem, right? And the reason why I say that, and it's not because there's also the message at the same time. So it's not that there wasn't that, but I think hip hop is like a space of just really of contradiction in a lot of ways, like all kind of pop culture is, right? Like it's the thing where it can do both things at the same time, right? It can be something that really is speaking kind of the voice of marginalized, oppressed people, right? Sort of resisting that oppression. And it can also be something that is sort of becomes like the tool of the oppressor in a way, right? And that does have a lot to do with this relationship to Blackness, right? Because Black culture in general, in this part of the world in particular, that's been the relationship, right? There's this guy, he has a book called Love and Theft, right? So this idea that like people love it, like sort of, particularly in this case, like white people love it, right? But then they steal it, type of thing, right? So there's this kind of weird, that's part of what happens, right? That's just part of the context that we're in. And I think, but at the same time, like hip hop is a form of culture, and so like all culture is going to travel, and it's going to go. You know, I like to say it has roots and roots. So like ROTS and ROUTES, right? So like obviously where it's rooted and the experiences that come, and then it's going to travel, right? And the way that it travels, sometimes it travels in ways that are really authentic too. And I don't mean authentic in like a kind of judgy way, but I mean that really speak to that connection to the roots, right? So like, for example, you might go someplace like Dakar, and there's a documentary on this, right? Like hip hop, like, you know, how they had young hip hop artists in Dakar, Senegal, using hip hop music to kind of promote democracy or something, right? Like in their country, right? So in that ways, it can be like connected to these other roots. And in some places, you know, it's like doing something else altogether, you know? And that happens. And I think that's part of the thing. I think for the culture, I think the challenge has always been how to like honor the history, right? While at the same time, and have like a loyalty to that, while at the same time, you know, growing in different kinds of ways, and how to like manage that. I think that becomes like, when you talk about this tension, right? I think that's often the tension. It's like, and I think one last thing, I always joke, I'm a real boom bap hip hop person. Like I don't want none of this new wave, fancy, like all kinds of random sounds. I'm real simple, real basic, right? And so for me, it's like, but trying to find an appreciation, right? Even mumble rap, right? It's like, I'm like, I don't know what you're saying. They all sound the same to me, but, right? It's like, but there's something happening here, right? You know what I'm saying? Like there's something happening here. It means something to somebody. And so my job as someone who's a part of this, I think, is to try to understand. So.
Yeah, I guess the tension is if it's a music that's kind of owned by everybody to some extent, right? You have to accept that other people are going to own it in the same way that you do, and there's a kind of element of letting go of that as well to an extent. Oh, there's a different form of hip hop there. Maybe I'll just listen to that. Maybe I've got to respect that space and respect that voice as well. Amazing, yeah. Okay, Chaka, do you want to come in at all? Do you have something to say? I saw you nodding there. Need to unmute your mic, I think.
Okay, there we go. Okay, yeah.
You're back in the room, yeah.
It was funny because there was a parallel there even with spoken word, right? It's sort of, you know, you write something, it means something to you, but the minute it's released, it's now part of the world, right? And so it's going to be interpreted and accepted by people in different ways. And so I have to be cognizant of that and responsible for it at the same time, right? So that's kind of where the shaking head came from. It's like, folks, it's gonna change, but it's no longer, it's mine, but it's no longer mine the minute it leaves my mouth, right? So I've got to honor what it then turns into.
Yeah.
I would like to add, if you could, if you read The Big Payback by Dan Charnas, it's a history of the business of hip hop, starting with, you know, Sylvia Robinson and Sugar Hill and all the well-intentioned people that might have gotten into it with true love, and then how it got commercialized and how radio became corporate and how we pretty much lost, you know, we lost hip hop to commercial rap radio. It's not hip hop. It's not the home of hip hop. It's commercial rap radio now. And a lot of people, even 10 years or 15 years younger than me, have no concept of ever hearing conscious rap on the radio, on commercial radio, like Poetry's Teachers or Brand Nubian or Public Enemy. Or the Lynch Mob or Ice Cube on public radio. Like, that's amazing to me. And so a lot has been lost. And now I believe that commercial rap labels are paying MCs to put out what they want, and it's not conscious stuff at all. We don't even know what some people are saying, but it would be awesome to see a return of conscious rap to the airwaves so that the community could hear it, because, you know, back for me, the beats were everything. So the beats of anything from, let's say, the late 70s to the mid 90s were fire, and the people could afford samples. So I feel like nobody's sampling anymore because nobody could afford it. Nobody has a break in their songs, very few. There's just so much that's changed with what we would say is hip hop music versus what rap music has become today, commercialized. And of course, there's the underground heads still putting it through and, you know, putting the message out. But does Immortal Technique get on the radio? I don't know. But I think that's important to remember. And I think one other thing I'd like to add is some of us have to become cultural gatekeepers. So, you know, for what I do with DJ battles or what we were doing with the park jams, if we want sponsors, but not sponsors that are going to make your stuff corny or inauthentic. So you have to be able to turn down money for the sake of authenticity sometimes. Companies want to own your events now, and then they'll tell you who to put on. That's not what I do. So anyway, a lot of times you have to say a lot of no's, and you have to keep it authentic for the real heads. And so when the new people find it, they'll recognize it as authentic as well.
Yeah, can I add something too to what Christy was saying too? Because I was thinking about it in terms of like, and this is the whole like capitalism part of it, right? And so like the ways in which, you know, what are the types of things that sell or thought to, or people think will sell, right? And so the ways that the profit motive, like the idea that we want to make as much money as possible, how that then shapes, right, what people think they can do, like artistically, and even if they do something artistically different, whether or not they can eat off of that, right? Because like, you know, like people have to pay their rent, they have to eat, they have to, you know, they got to go to school, whatever, right? And so I think it's a real tension, I think too, because I think it's like, because I'll be thinking like, you know, what is like, and then what are standards, and who decides our standards anymore? Like, what is like, you know, a good song, a good beat, you know, like, you know what I mean? Like, how do, like, where does that come? And I don't think it's resolved, you know, but I do think that those are, these are the kind of questions that I think it's like, this is the struggle, I think, trying to figure it out, you know, in a way that, because I do think, and I'll say last thing, I do think I'm one of these people, like I am committed to liberation. So like, so if we're part of this and we're doing this, right, then it's like, okay, well, which parts of this are going to get us closer to that, and what may not be doing that, and how can, at the very least, can we promote and elevate the stuff that's getting us closer? and kind of thinking in that kind of way as well.
Can I say one quick thing? Like going back to what Chrissy was saying, it makes me. I'm writing this thing now, or working on this thing about allyship right now, and it's funny to me because there's a lot of these questions of, oh wow, I didn't know, or is it really like this, or like, wow, open eyes, right? And it's sort of, if we would have kept the sort of the music that was playing at those times, it wouldn't, I mean, you can argue whether it should be surprising anyway, but that was also part of the conversation, part of the dialogue, and that stopped, right? So part of me is sort of, I'm sort of investigating that idea that, because that conversation was stopped in the mainstream, folks, it's like, it's been complacent. Folks are complacent now. Oh, okay, that's not happening anymore, that kind of thing. So I think that plays an important role in sort of the argument of, or the idea that it's a shame that that's not in the public eye anymore.
Could
I
I
would
maybe
also like to add that. Sorry.
Oh no, you please.
Okay. I would like to add that back in the day, we heard so many Islamic references in rap, which I don't know even happens today in commercial rap. But that started me on my journey to finding out what Islam was about. And I think that's really important. And I don't know if anybody is sampling speeches anymore, and all the cool things that were in raps and mixtapes back in the day. There's even a song on Tommy Boy called Malcolm X No Sellout. Like, people like me who didn't grow up with any Malcolm X speeches or anything were introduced to Malcolm X and all kind of other leaders that I would have not known about in my predominantly white country community. So I wish that hip hop music was at that point again where it put you on to different people and important issues that I don't know if it does anymore. That's all. Sorry.
No, don't apologize, please. I mean, I guess it really just brings us around to our final question, really, which is, I mean, the last couple of months, politics has become incredibly energized again because of some of the tragic scenes that we've seen on the streets of America. Protest movements have been reignited. Not that they ever went away, but they've been re-energized and they've come back into focus for many people who did not necessarily have that on their radar. It's pushed its way back into many mainstream media outlets and so on. I guess, especially to brothers and sisters in the US at the moment, I just want to ask a question. To what extent do you feel that, do you notice a kind of ripple through in the hip hop community? What's happening in the world of hip hop as those political waves kind of break? Do you notice anything different? Do you feel anything different? And how's hip hop responding to that re-energized political agenda? Anybody? We can free to jump in. Sorry, was that too heavy a question?
There are things I would like to see. There's things I would like to see, but they're not happening. Like, I'd love to see a militant DJ mixtape come out. I would love to hear the best of the strong MCs mixed with the best beats and the best samples. It's a perfect time for a mixtape. Where there's stuff that I wish I was seeing. I here in the US, and I'm following a lot of people and trying to watch, but I don't see it, except for the good thing, some people like Jazzy Jeff are speaking out and reminding people to wear masks and things like that. I think it's gotten to the point where a lot of people are afraid to be political for fear of saying the wrong thing and messing up and then getting publicly shamed for it. A lot of people are afraid to be political anymore.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the only thing I see on my side, and it just could be my sort of narrow view, is maybe the roots. Black Thought. You'll hear in some of the stuff that he's doing, the picnic that he just put out not too long ago. Like, I think he will go into, I mean, if you can work through his, as far as I'm concerned, he's the GOAT, right? But if you can work through it, what he's saying is just, it's saying a lot about the world that we're in now. But outside of that, I don't see much, except for like underground folks, talking about stuff.
I think Christy made a really interesting point about people being scared to make political statements. I think the latest person I saw who was in hot water, like one for a better word, is Terry Crews, right? About some of the things that he's been saying about Black Lives Matter and about the protests in America. I mean, do you think that speaking through music and speaking through that hip hop kind of culture and speaking through hip hop music as an art form it should be fearless, right? It should have that fearless element.
So Terry Crews is not a good example of somebody at all.
No. Like, that's what I mean. He's a very bad. But he said something that he was being fearless, right? But he just said what he wanted to say.
That I don't know if that was fear. I don't know. I don't think actually he was being fearless. But we're gonna put Terry Crews to the side.
Right.
But I think that I think it's complicated, right? So I think, like, for example, back in 2015, when there were a lot of uprisings, right? For example, Kendrick Lamar's song "All Right" became a sort of an anthem of sorts, right? And it really energized. It was something that it became a rallying cry, right? We see that. I think, like, even that sister who got arrested, and she's like, "You're gonna lose your job," and now people made like little mixes of it, and now there was something, I think it was from a police department in LA, and people shouting, "You gonna use your job. You're gonna lose your job," right? As a part of the kind of whole abolition movement, right? Defunding the police. So I mean, but then you have like Killer Mike and T.I. in Atlanta, who were like standing by with the mayor, the black mayor of Atlanta, right? And basically kind of like criticizing the uprisings, right? And people are kind of like, wait, and then, the Roots, like I watched the Roots Picnic, and it's like all like this voting stuff and like encourage people to vote, which is a good thing to do, right? But then it's also like, the movement, like where's the movement? So I feel like it's complicated. I feel like there's stuff happening. The BET Awards they had, and it's like BET, right? But it was like probably the best BET Awards I've seen maybe ever, right? But then, and it opened with like this remix of Fight the Power, which was like interesting. I mean, it was great to see that. I was sad to see there was only one female voice that was there. And there was a remix, so it wasn't just Chuck D and Flavor Flav, right? So there were other people they brought on. But then the award show, which has this very sort of specific critique of like what's happening, between that are the commercials from like P&G and like, and they're great commercials, but they're commercials, So like, I think it's I don't know. I don't have an answer to that question of like what does it have to offer? I mean, I think what hip hop has to offer is what always has to offer, right? It's a way to sort of for people to speak. It's a way to mobilize, and it's a way to organize. And I think what we're seeing is because hip hop is so like entangled in, right, like industry and the commercial, that kind of stuff, then that ability to speak and organize and mobilize is real tricky because it's like, so I just feel like it's tricky. But I do feel like I'm a Gemini. I don't know why that matters, but it does. And so I feel like
you see both sides of the argument, right?
Is that what it is? But I just feel like I feel like the potential is there, right? There's potential and there's possibility, and it's just about us sort of, I guess, continue to do what people are already doing, what Chrissy's already doing, what Shaka's already doing. Just keep plugging away, and I think that's really all we can do right now, and then amplify the good that we see, like Betty Shabazz said. So.
Well, maybe Shaka spoke about there being stuff going on in the underground. Maybe something like a movement as diverse and changing as hip hop. It's always kind of develops its own mainstreams, and then it develops its own kind of chambers where once it becomes a mainstream, it gets its own underground again. And maybe the underground, it's time for the underground to break through again. We seem to have this sense of it wanting to, reinvent itself. So who knows? Maybe if we keep pushing in the way that you say, maybe that will happen. Manpreet, do you want to draw the threads together?
I'll try my best. We were going to go to Mohammed's iPad drawing, because if you noticed, every so often we were skipping back and forward to some of Mohammed's drawings that he was doing, but I have just gotten news from the man himself that he forgot to plug his iPad in, which is I don't know. We're on like I think we're on our 9th show or our 10th show, and this has never happened. So, Mohammed, do you want to explain what you drawed and what happened to your iPad, mate?
Sure.
Into the lamp post.
You know,
back in the day.
did you see? You saw the lamppost, right? Did you see the lamppost?
No.
Oh my God! No, so I'd drawn the lamppost into the design. I was just listening to the conversation, and I had 2 lampposts shining some light down as well. But you don't see the image yet because the iPad, which is here right now, my big iPad Pro. I always praise Steve Jobs for the Apple Pencil and the iPad Pro because without this tool, I wouldn't be doing this live drawing. But you know, unfortunately, as I said, my battery's died, and they haven't invented a kind of a wireless charger, I don't think yet. So unfortunately, it has died.
They haven't invented a self-charging iPad that you need. Or what you could have done, he just plugged in, bro. You know, no excuse. Don't blame Steve Jobs for this, bro. Come on.
Yeah. So yeah, no, I'll share the image because every time I love kind of, I've been quiet listening to the conversation and I've enjoyed it. Although my iPad's now booting up now, but Apple takes forever, doesn't it? So I've just enjoyed listening to the conversation and listening, and you know, I'm hoping those who've been watching have enjoyed seeing the visuals that we've been mixing in from the drawing and the video pieces as well, and trying to create what we describe as a little bit of an immersive live stream, really, because you know, let's face it, during this lockdown, during the shelter in place, you know, we're all getting a bit zoomed out, right? You know, these conferences. Suad, you were saying that were you saying this is your last live stream or something? Isn't that right?
This is my last public presentation in general. So even if although next year we'll probably still be
is that
online,
but just generally in life, you're never doing one again?
No, for a year.
Why?
For a year.
Is there? You're done.
I'm on leave. I'm on leave to work on my next work, and so I just want to focus. And I feel like, you know, I'm a focus, and it's easier to focus if I'm not trying to prepare to, you know, talk.
Ignore me. I'm just being nosy. I just thought, why are you leaving the live stream world? You know?
No, it's okay. no, it's okay. But I too am zoomed out as well. I mean, these are great, and it's a great opportunity to chat and talk and connect. But you know, it's also a lot. You know, there's a lot going on in the world right now, right? So
yeah, absolutely. So I mean, I just want to thank everybody really for coming and giving their time. This live stream, of course, will be sitting on Soul City Art's Facebook page, so you know, people can watch. We can share it out there as well for people to watch back if it was a bit late for them. Here in the UK, it's just gone past 10 p.m. So you know, we will be doing this again. We're going to be doing it monthly. We've been going weekly during the lockdown period, but now we're going to be turning to taking it every month. So congregate. Soul City Arts is our Twitter and Instagram page. I think let's get a bit of a kind of just go around and collecting everyone's social media handles for people who want to stay connected with everybody who's been on. Mine, I'll start with mine. Mine is Ali Aerosol on Instagram and Twitter. But if you want to just go around, Suad, do you want to just share your social media?
Yeah, mine is at DRSUAD at Dr. Suad on Twitter, and DOCTASUAD Dr. Suad on IG.
Christy?
On Facebook, my personal profile is Christy ZEEE, and you could also follow me on at DMCUSA DJ Battles and at Tools of War Jams on most social media platforms.
Okay. And Shaka?
Sure, I am Papa Shock, so PAPPATSHAK on IG and Twitter, but easiest is just to put it in Google and my stuff will come up.
Fantastic. Right, great. And James, yourself?
Yeah, and my Twitter handle would be at Dr_James_H.
Right, Manpreet, yourself finally?
I don't have doctor or anything in my name now. I feel really what do I say? Underqualified for this conversation. Mine
School
is
of life, brother. School of life.
PhD _ Manpreet Garage. No, not really. It's just Manpreet Garage, as you can see here. But yeah, thank you so much for everyone who's locked in. And oh yeah, I should plug L Fresh as well. L Fresh, the line who you heard from Sydney. Type in L Fresh, L Fresh the line, all one word on Instagram and Twitter and so forth. And Copper listen to his album. I think Suad, Shaka, and Z, you really like this guy's work, so I implore you to check him out as well. Mohammed, is your iPad back on yet, bro? Are we good or not?
I'm doing the old-fashioned. This is called old school screen mirroring, right? Normally I can screen mirror airlessly, but this is the old-fashioned screen. For those who are,
check it out.
the new, I'm just showing you my literally. I don't know if that's back.
Wow.
Forward a bit.
Okay, here we go. Screen mirroring on another level. This is right.
I can't really. It's a bit blurry, but there we go.
Okay.
It looks dope. I could see those that's the light, right?
Yeah. I think it's probably a bit of light. Yeah. There we go.
Nice.
So I won't explain it too much, to be honest with you. Sometimes I don't like explaining art. Let people kind of take what they want from it. But listen, guys, I hope I appreciate everybody tuning in and connecting with us on this. Please do stay connected. I'd love to. It's been many months actually. Christy, Suad, Shaka, since we've met in person. We've kind of connected in different places, in different parts of the places where I've run my travels. But I'd love to stay connected and see how we can continue to build together creatively as well. So please, let's keep in touch, right?
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.